You can't go wrong with Tom and Jerry, and I'm not talking about the movie, I'm talking about the classic cartoon. So much nostalgia. I miss those days. What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. Tom and Jerry is hitting HBO Max in theaters today, and we are going to talk about it. No spoilers, of course. I need you in the comments down below. Are you a fan of the original Tom and Jerry? Do you like Chloe Grace Moretz? She's in this movie. Okay. Tom the cat and Jerry the mouse get kicked out of their home and relocate to a fancy New York hotel where a scrappy employee named Kayla will lose her job if she can't evict Jerry before a high-class wedding at the hotel. Her solution? Hiring Tom to get rid of this pesky mouse. And unfortunately, we're not dealing with Tom and Jerry as much here. We're dealing more so with other characters, their situation, and just how Tom and Jerry kind of get drug into it. And through that, we get to see the hijinks, the mayhem, Tom and Jerry just kind of running after each other, and every little moment that we get with those two wonderful and just entertaining characters. I mean, even to this day, we see how something like that can resonate with an audience that may not even know. I mean, younger kids, they may have never even heard of Tom and Jerry before this. They could watch this and have a fantastic time just with those two characters. Now, do I wish they would have taken up the majority of the film as opposed to what we do get? Absolutely, but we'll get to that. I want to start with the good. And what works is the fact that it knows its target audience when it's hitting those moments, right? It understands, okay, this is a film built for kids, but it's also semi-built for those that have nostalgia for these two characters because they do a great job of capturing the tone and the spirit of these two. Not only these two, though, we get some of the other characters that we know and love from Tom and Jerry lore. Not a huge inclusion. I feel like they're maybe saving certain things for the sequel, but that aspect of the story all comes together nicely, and they include really memorable things that we remember from the old show, like the sound effects, the scream when Tom is flying from a building, the idea that Jerry is constantly outsmarting Tom, but Tom is always finding a new way to at least think he's getting the upper hand. So if all of those things are elements that you want to see, even though you're not going to see maybe as much as I wanted, then I do think this film is at least worth a watch. And again, for kids and families, it works. Now, getting into my negatives, I do think the shell, the surrounding story elements, the subplots, which actually ends up kind of being the main plot with this wedding, and Chloe Grace Moretz, her character of Kayla, is trying to find herself at the beginning of this film. She's down and out. She realizes that she can find a way into this job, but she has to kind of prove to those above her that she belongs, even though really what she does at the beginning of the film, she technically doesn't belong. Then comes Michael Pena, his character, silly, wacky, quirky, exactly what we expect from him. But Terrence was at least entertaining at times. We have Colin Jost, he's Bend, he's the groom, we have a bride and groom, and everything's kind of building up to this wedding. But along the way, they bring in Tom to hunt down Jerry, who's kind of causing a ruckus in this hotel, and both characters are working for our human characters, and that's how we get our hijinks. My big issue with this film is the lack of focus on what we're coming in and watching it for in the first place. That's Tom and Jerry. I wanted Tom and Jerry to be on screen every single second, because when they're on screen, it is very entertaining, very fun. The story surrounding them is bad. I'll be honest with you. The plot here, there is no plot, right? There is an end game for these characters, but they don't do enough to build up these characters, and we don't care. We don't care about their relationships. I somewhat care about Chloe Grace Moretz because I like her as an actress, but when you look at the performances, and I understand this isn't the kind of film that you're sitting and criticizing the performances because they're meant to be something special. No, but they're not the best, and they have so much screen time, like an overwhelming amount of screen time compared to Tom and Jerry. It makes it such a lackluster experience because they take up, it's 5 minutes of them, 1 minute of Tom and Jerry, 5 more minutes of them, and then 10 minutes of them, and then every now and then we can cut to Tom or Jerry or Spike. I guess there's not that much of Spike, but they try to build the emotions surrounding this ridiculous plot involving this hotel that I just didn't care about at all. And understandably so, I have to look at it from the perspective of the intended audience. And they're not really going to care about that. They're going to be like, let's get back to the hijinks. And when we get there with Tom and Jerry, it works extremely well. But for me to criticize the experience as a whole, I have to factor in what takes up the majority of the time, and that is this story that is just very poorly crafted, poorly put together, and I don't understand why that was the focus. They try to add in modern music that kind of plays through the background when we'll cut to Tom and Jerry. I don't understand why they made that decision, because it didn't quite work. And then, of course, Tom is taking selfies and they're doing things that are very 2021. It wasn't as cringeworthy as maybe you expect. You look at a film like Smurfs and something like Yogi Bear. I mean, those are the kinds of films that you're going to make comparisons to. And I will admit, when we would cut back and forth from the humans to our cartoon characters here, it did remind me of Smurfs. And that is not a good comparison to make. And I have the same complaint here that I had with that film. Why are we focusing on this? Give us what we signed up for. And we get it. We just don't get very much of it. And that's the main problem with this movie, because I just didn't care about the story. So if you guys are checking out this film on HBO Max this weekend or in theaters, let me know. Drop your thumbs up. When the focus is on our classic characters, Tom and Jerry works well. Unfortunately, the movie sets that aside for a tired and sloppy story. Again, my score is a 42, but if you have younger kids, a family, and you're a fan of these characters, you will at least get something out of those moments. And I think that's important to a lot of people, especially as hardcore fans of Tom and Jerry, a show that I grew up with, and those moments worked well. It's just the rest of the story, I don't really know what that was about. Okay, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Come back. We have more reviews on this channel. The Golden Globes on Sunday. I'll be reacting, but first, I have to give some predictions. I'm going to go make that now. I'll see you soon.